Welcome to the Grounds for Success podcast. I'm your host, Austin Seltzer. Together, we'll unveil the keys to success in the music industry. Join me as I explore my guests' life stories and experiences to uncover practical insights to help you align with your goals more effectively. Hey, coffee drinkers. I'm so stoked for you to listen to today's podcast. I have on the Crystal Method. So if you like this content, if you like hearing about, the behind the scenes on somebody like the Crystal Method or other guests, please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. I want to be able to get this content to you as easily as possible, and that would help me out a lot. On today's episode, we talk about so many different things, but to give you a little idea of what's to come, creating a studio that allows for you to not always create the same track, but to keep things fresh. So how to make a studio feel like you can come in and make unique ideas each time you step in. We also talk about how Scott likes to start new tracks. We'll talk about how he always had music going on at the house whenever he was growing up, like The Clash, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. And he found a lot of his creative inspiration, like sonically, through the music that he would hear in the house at an early age. He also used Star Wars and other scores from films of the time to influence like his creative play. So he would take like figurines and reenact scenes to music. And this is really a lot of what shaped the sound that would be the Crystal Method. Incredibly well known for having music and video games and movies. We'll also talk about how he loved to play air drums and how this really helped him hone in his rhythm and to play drum programming machines and whatnot in their music. We'll also talk about his bomb shelter studio, which I think is pretty cool. We'll talk about how they scored to picture and how that came about and some of the behind the scenes on how they went and did that. And we'll also talk, most importantly, I think, about the almost 30-year span of the Crystal Method and how to go about having a career that's that long. So much insight into that answer. All right, let's get caffeinated. Cheers. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. It's awesome to have you.
Austin, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful setup you have here.
Thank you. Lots of love was put into that. And I have to send love your way. You actually are drinking my black coffee, and I'm stoked about that.
You sent out the how do you like your coffee request, and I told you how I like it when I'm normally going to places that the coffee is subpar or not as refined as what you've been kind enough to serve me today. So it's in the studio, in my studio, I have a guy there named Tobias who he's gone through his growing hot peppers, making hot sauce phase, and he got into roasting his own coffee beans phase.
Really?
And he'd come over every once in a while with a superb cup of coffee. And it's amazing because we're so inclined to just grab something, whether it's at a Starbucks or make something at home, and you tend to to try to cut it a bit, try to cut that bitterness, but it's quite something when you get a hold of a really nice cup of coffee. So I appreciate it. I expected something really wonderful, and it's definitely meeting my expectations.
Well, hilariously, like I also think of grounds as like ground floor. So if I were, giving Folgers, we would be starting at the ground floor.
Maybe there, or if it was like a sort of the hot one, sort of gradually start out with the shittiest cup of coffee and then get up to the spat out of a monkey's ass kind of whatever that stuff is. Have you ever tried that?
I have. It's not great.
It's not great.
I don't think it's great.
It's very interesting decor you have in here. It's besides all the technical gear, you know, you replace those with real candles, and we could be you know, we could be transported back in time in here.
Absolutely.
It's a really great, really great. So, was this used to be like an over, like, did you do overdubs in here and then you turned it into this, or is it just kind of a storage area?
It was a storage area.
Oh, wow.
More like a white prison cell.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just white walls, concrete floors, not the vibe at all.
Yeah.
But
Well,
same with my studio room. It was the same exact thing. And then this wall was built and the opposite wall was built in the studio. So it's like I did a lot to make it feel like this.
yeah. And yeah, it feels very cozy, and a vibe that you know, I appreciate. I do have like natural light in my room, but most of the time I keep it relatively dark.
Yeah. I found that creators love light. I'm a refiner. And like I do think I'm a creative,
Yeah.
but I'm not creating. And like refining a mix or doing a master or whatever, I want straight lines. I don't want to feel the room. I just want to be
Yeah.
in the sound.
Yeah.
And so natural light is, I'm totally a vampire, which this
Yeah.
room looks like. There is a window right there, but
You wouldn't be able to tell.
no, if I opened it though, we would
We'd
no longer be
would
in Victorian
evaporate. Yeah.
Gothic.
When my partner Ken was still in the band, we bought this building, and you know, it sort of built our quote unquote, you know, dream studio. And part of the one of the things on our checklist was having natural light, because we had come from a studio in this little 2-car garage in La Crescenta, where we made the first 3 albums, 4 albums, yeah, first 3 albums, and where it was just, you know, a dingy, dark, you know, room where we didn't have a lot of the creature comfort. So this building, we had to, you know, literally raise the roof so we can build this 4-panel shielded component window where we can independently control each of the shades. And it's a great reveal when you showing people the studio, that, you know, once you're in the dark and all of a sudden the, you know,
That sounds real cool.
yeah, the things start to roll up. But
I need to get one of those for mine.
Unfortunately, I do have some leaks, but I've been I think everybody over the last 6 months has found that their building is somewhat flawed when it comes to keeping the rain out, just because we've had so much. But yeah, it's a great building. We've been there for the past 16 years. So it would be great to like go away for 3 months and just write down everything that I want, and then come back and have it all implemented. You know, because sometimes a room just becomes, you know, a prisoner of your own, you know, years and years of collecting, you know, whether it's, you know, especially in a room where you have a building that has 25 plus years of the band, you know, since I have the space, I just sort of hold on to it. And so, but it would be nice to have one of those studio makeovers where, you know, you get a professional in there and
HGTV.
Yeah. Maybe that's the show that we should work on.
To pimp your studio.
Yeah, pimp your, yeah. It's a great space, and you're welcome to come by anytime and check it out.
I'd love to see it. What kind of consoles were you guys working on?
Well, we started. I mean, we never had the money to go and buy a big proper Neve or SSL, or our first 3 or 4 albums were made with just a Mackie 3208 with a 16-channel sidecar, and which was really helpful to have that separate sidecar on the other side of the room with all the gear, different synths, and another computer plugged into it, and then be able to just route everything over. So, and it was very serviceable. It you know, it had the send and returns and 8 bus, and it was, you know, it was a great, clean you know what you're getting with the Mackie stuff. So, and then as we wanted to be able to recall things, we picked up the DB8 or D8B or I think DB8. It's the little their digital board that that you could recall certain things, and then eventually when we went to the new studio, we went fully into Pro Tools, and we were using their D command, which essentially became just a giant paperweight because much of it was more intuitive, although it was more intuitive for Ken because he was more the engineer to use the dials and everything to EQ, but after a while you just mouse it or trackball it and yeah, and then when it became to but we still used it for fader movements and different things like that, and but soon as when he retired, and then I decided to sell that, and I bought this Chandler and it's a sidecar mixer because I wanted that analog sound, if you will, and even though I don't really use that much either, because it's, again, you get into recall, and then when you have so many tracks, you're just dealing with latency and going in and out. But anyway, so but yeah, it's a great room. A lot of room for my various synths, and it's one I've been comfortable in. But I do find that I think it would be sort of a breath of fresh air if something were to happen in there that would sort of change the room around a bit and give it a fresh feel.
Yeah, I talked with one of my guests about inviting chaos into your life, just like to break out of the cycle, break out of like your norm to be more creative.
Yeah.
I think it's so necessary.
Yeah, and I find when I go to other people's studios, it helps me get away from the mindset of also being the engineer, or running the board or running the computer. I could just sit and noodle on a synth, and then listen on headphones and go, how's this sound? Oh, that sounds cool. Let's record that in, and then do multiple takes of things like that. I did that a lot more on the last album, The Trip Out, and to a certain degree on The Trip Home, where it was hooking up synths and getting a sound, getting something that inspired the rest of the rest of the movement, the rest of the tracks, because it's very daunting to turn on start fresh on a new song, and you're not sure where to go, and so lots of times I try to remember the ways that when we didn't have the unlimited power of digital audio and computer processing power, like what. Oh yeah, that's right. We just kind of set up a synth and put it through a bunch of distortion pedals and got a gnarly sound and jammed out on that for a while, and then took whatever layers that were there and then fed that into a sampler and started cutting into it, and that was the creative process. So doing that a bit more as of late does help kickstart things and kind of get you out of that sort of that momentary, sort of deer in the headlights vibe that one can get when they're staring at a blank canvas.
Yeah. For those listening and watching, this is somewhat deep in the weeds of production, which is great, and I want people to realize that what you just said, I think, it's like the very fabric of how to create. It's just like, do the damn thing.
Yeah.
So you said just dial in some distortion with guitar pedals, which is really cool, on a synth, and just jam.
Yeah.
And after a while, something is going to click, and you're like, oh shit, that little thing was cool. And then you put that down and you keep moving, put it in a sampler, which For those listening, it's just a way that you can take a section of what you played and play it on keys, different notes, bend it, shorten it, make it ramp in. I'm trying to make this less technical, like
Yeah.
ramp in
It's
volume,
very
ramp
much
out.
like if you're just writing stuff down, writing notes down, writing, paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, and maybe, after further examination, only 2 of those paragraphs work. You just sort of pull those out, and then you can build around that. It's all about getting something flowing, something going, something in, just, and that's something that sometimes, that I have to remind myself of, especially when I'm, in a room by myself where I'm just, should I pull up one of the 15 to 500 different ideas that I've started over the last 5 years, where every once in a while I'm reminded of something. Oh, well, that's worked on that little idea, and I do have success that way, like going through and just pulling something up and going, oh yeah, this was something that I started. This might be good with this, and you have to kind of, go through the archives a bit and sort of rediscover things that may be lost to another idea, another project. But yeah, it's a process, and one that sometimes remembering different ways that we've done things in the past sort of help lead things that happen in the future.
Amazing. I would love to go all the way back to the start. And this isn't, but this isn't the start of your career. This is the start of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know some about your family growing up and how childhood, like things that you did in childhood and how you were raised, and kind of just trying to figure out the fabric of what set you on this path.
Well, I was a latchkey kid. I was an only child, so and my parents loved music. Those are not necessarily connected, but because there was always music in the house, my mom loved. They were really young when I was born too, so and we're talking. I was born in 1970, so. As I was growing up, I grew up in the age of, of classic rock, progressive rock, disco, punk, metal, new wave, modern music, electronic music, and of course rock, was everywhere. And so, in the age of MTV, so I was always around music, and I started to find the things that I liked. And then being a latchkey kid, I was, really into Star Wars. And, if I could only imagine if Star Wars would have come out in an age where video was on demand, I would have burned through hundreds of hours of rewatching it. And I think I probably would have become numb to it, where back in my time, you had the score. So you had John Williams' score, which pretty much told the tale of the movie in sequential order. So, I had action figures, and I'd put the score on, and I would, visualize through the score. So, in a way that really helped me understand how I think about music, and how it became, like, especially in the kind of music we ended up making, it was very antagonistic. There was like here's the bass line kind of setting the mood, and then all of a sudden here comes something else, some synth that made its way in and stood out, and then there was a bigger synth. There's always something bigger, and then there'd be the chords and the fluff that would kind of change the dynamic of the track or change the mood of this track. And so again, that's very much like a score to a movie, where there's all this build up and tension, and then then there's a release. And so making music was a real visual thing for me. And then I started to hear music in a different way, and experience music in a different way, and I got really into rock and metal, and I always wanted to play drums. It was always my I felt my I don't know, it felt the most primal instinct in me was to play drums. I love watching drummers. I love watching Tommy Lee twirl his sticks, and I love the action, the timing of it. I don't know if I would ever have been a good drummer, because you have to, air drums is much different. You never miss a hit when you're air drumming, and I would do that a lot. And I would always want a drum kit, but my mom was not just reluctant; she was adamant that I would, that because her brother was was in a band that they would play in the garage, and all she'd hear, is his shitty drumming through the walls. It was like, and she couldn't imagine having to go through that again. And so she pointed me towards guitar, which again, I also was fascinated with that aspect of it, the having, an instrument and performing with it. And, I was real, driven by the sound of it, and the different layers of it. And so I took guitar lessons. But I still would, I'd go and I had one drumstick and a stick from the backyard, and I would sit, and I would air drum with headphones on in, living room, to various different Metallica and Crew and all the different bands I was into. And then
Damn, what? 1 second. You were definitely. There's a lot of parallels to my story. I definitely was supposed to be a drummer. You could see it by I was an absolute professional pots and pan smacker, but just like you, my mom was like, absolutely not. I'm not getting a drum set. It's going to be noisy and loud and this and that. But what I was going to say is, I was not drumming to shit. You were doing it to Metallica. I was just pop, pop, pop.
Yeah,
you can see it.
But what I did notice from the very beginning is that it helped me with my understanding of rhythm, or getting in and on a drum machine, or being one that had to tap things out and play. I didn't take piano lessons. I took guitar lessons for years, but then as soon as I discovered Depeche Mode, I was like, put the guitar aside. Well, not necessarily. I didn't put it completely aside, because I was still making music with guitars. When I met Ken, I had a sampler and a little drum machine and a 4-track and a guitar and a synth. I think I might have said that. But and so I love bands like New Order and Depeche Mode, and still loved rock. I'd still listen to heavy metal or the Cult and different bands that had electronic elements or more rock elements, but they was all just blending of the world. So, but as I started to get more into that more electronic stuff, the guitar took a back seat. Although on the first album, Vegas, there's a track like High Roller that has some guitar in it that I played. But again, I just I never had necessarily the patience or the focus to focus on one instrument. Mainly my focus became on like understanding how to put everything together in a DAW or work with the emerging world of making music with computers, which we were 89, 90 and the very sort of beginnings of it. We had a Mac 2 CI and an early version of Performer, which was everything was all MIDI. Staring at a small little screen and rudimentary graphics and but it was it achieved something that that allowed us to move forward, so that was my focus over the years. So
Yeah. Well, I want to know when did you pick up the guitar? Because it sounds like, is that the first instrument that you started to learn any kind of musical structure?
but I was my guitar teacher actually is this very famous '80s rock star named Mark Slaughter, who was in the band called Slaughter, and he was my guitar teacher before he went on to great success in those in the height of the '80s hair metal days. But um, I was he was always into teaching me scales, and although I did practice that stuff, I really wanted to just know what the riff was, in a song. That was sort of how I, initially sort of understanding, that aspect of making music. But it was really about just taking in all the things that I've learned and heard over the last 40 years of at the time 15, 20 years of my life, where I've just been a big fan of music from all different genres, and just really listening to a lot of music all the time. And so I would say when we were making our first album, there were moments when I was like, because we were making music that was more club based, or club that sort of rooted in the electronic techno rave scene at the time. But we understood that you had to do like a typical track that we would enjoy in a club. We'd come home and we'd go and buy that album or that 12-inch, and we'd come back and be like, oh, shit, this thing's like 5 minutes of the same shit. We didn't realize that it's all about how the DJ manipulates it and how you blends and mixes. And so we felt that if we were going to have success, we would have to make something or create something that one could listen to in any environment. It could be played in a club. It could be played in the car. It could be played, on your headphones or in your Walkman or whatever was available at the time. And it, so that structure and of understanding how to put a song together, was, sort of rooted in the things that we both. And Ken was a big lover of music as well, and he had a different taste. He wasn't as much into the heavy metal stuff, but we both really loved Public Enemy and Beastie Boys and everything. How we understand how to create a track came from our shared love of music, and then just understanding where we wanted to go and what we want to hear in our own music once we got it done.
I love that. When did you meet Ken, and how did you guys decide, like, we're going to do this?
It was very random. We were both working in the same grocery store. He's about 8 years older than me. So I was in my late teens, maybe it was 20. I would say it was 19, 20. And I brought a drum machine into work. So at a grocery store, you have like 2 15-minute breaks. And so I thought, well, I was really excited to play on this new piece of gear that I picked up. So I just brought it in. I was working on it, playing with it in the break room, which is not something you normally see, in that environment. Somebody working on a little drum machine with their headphones in a break room. So he's like, "Oh, you make music?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I have a guitar and I write. I've written a couple songs. Some lyrics and." He said, "Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm working with the singer. You want to come by and play me some of your songs? Maybe it might be good for the singer I'm working with." And so I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I went over and he had a little apartment. He had a little setup in there, and I brought my little Gorilla amplifier and my guitar, and he had a little reel to reel. So he set me up with and I just started playing the song, and turned out it worked well with the singer. And then we started working with the singer. Both of us started working with the singer. And then And then Ken eventually got a job working for a producer out here in California, and he moved. We were both in Vegas at the time, and he moved and got set up. And then I would come every weekend or every other weekend. We'd work on music, but we also got to these raves that were happening, underground events in Los Angeles in the late '80s and early '90s, and that was where we go into these rooms and be blown away by the energy that was created by a DJ playing records from different artists from around the world, and the way that he was able to manipulate those records and the environment, you're in a dingy warehouse in the middle of seedy downtown, and you were in a room with 5 to 1,500 people of every different race and creed you can possibly imagine, and there was no tension, there was no aggression. We just were all there to experience this singular moment, and it was really inspiring. So we have this gear that we thought that we were going to be produced. We were going to be like the white Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, like we were going to do remixes and work with and produce people. And we had done that. We had found a studio that was in Hollywood, Melrose and La Brea, and it already had a studio built into it. And it was, this is 1991. It was $1,800 a month, which is like $3,000, $4,000. I mean, it was crazy. We burned through our savings real quick on that, and
yeah, that sounds like a nice place back then.
Yeah,
sure.
It was really great. And then things started to become a little bleak, and I went back to work for the grocery store that I was working with in Vegas. And Ken took a job to working with various different production companies. Actually worked with rapper the Humpty Hump, or
do the Humpty Hump.
My mind is failing me right now. But he had a little record label up in Santa Clarita, and so he'd work in that. He worked, engineered like some early Tupac stuff, and then we just started to get our mojo back.
Wait, I gotta interrupt there. So you went back to Vegas?
No, I moved. No, we stayed in California. That company that I was working for in Vegas, they came to California.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, the grocery store. This grocery store called Smith's.
I see. Okay.
And I went. I was working in the video department. They had this is back when they had little Blockbusters inside this massive grocery store. So, one of the days I was working in the video store, and I put on, it was like The Dark Crystal, which I think I'd seen in passing. I can't remember. I didn't go to the movie theaters, but I put it on, and, another world, another time in the age of wonder. The crystal cracked, and I was like, holy shit. Like that, rented that, took that home, hooked it up, sampled it, and
yeah, that's so cool.
And eventually it became the lead, the intro for Triple I Got You, which was the first track on our album Vegas. So these little moments where you're just doing what you're supposed to do, and you're paying attention to the world around you. And we would continue to go out to clubs and continue to experience, what was happening in the electronic rave scene at the time. And then things got a little bleak. Grunge kind of took over 92, 93, 94. Nobody was really paying attention to, which was basically disco at the time, dance clubs with kids with big pants and lollipops, but we continued to persevere, and we continued to believe that we're on the right path, and we made our first single called "Now's the Time," and it was released on the first release for this label called City of Angels. Printed up 3,000 12-inches, and all those sold, and we were like, wow, that's amazing. And then
we have to look into this. You're skipping over some crazy cool things. So wait, first, how did you get on a record label? Because so we went from you were in clubs and you saw how this music affected a room, and you you felt at home in that room. It was like everybody was just here to enjoy this music in a dark, dingy room. You were inspired to no longer produce for other people, but now to be an artist. And how did we go from that moment to signing your first record deal?
Well, we put together a demo, and we were introduced to I can't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow we got a really small production publishing deal with EMI. It was really small, and in the end, they made out really well from that publishing deal because they had a very good percentage of our publishing going forward for a certain amount of time. But they gave us $750 to basically find somebody to help us put this track out. We had a demo tape, and then so there was a Herb magazine, which was a big local sort of lifestyle magazine based around the rave scene that was run by Raymond Roker, and it was, I think it was, came out every couple of weeks, and there was a classified section, and there was a advertisement in there for starting up a record label, looking for demos, 12-inch, for this particular style of music. And we sent our demo in, and we got a little bite from this company, and then it went away. And then we went down to, we kind of had to move out of that one studio and started, getting back to keeping our heads above water. And then we, all of a sudden, out of the blue, these two guys that were part of that other company reached out to us, Justin King and Stephen Melrose. Stephen was from Scotland, and Justin was from the UK, and they'd been over in the US for a little while. And they were like, "We really like this track. We want to put it out." And we were like, "Oh, really? That's amazing." But we need two more songs. We need to fill out this 12-inch. You need, and so we did another remix. The first one was "Now's the Time," featured this sample from Martin Luther King Jr. "Now is the time," and so we sampled that off of one of those speech albums that are out there, and then did a remix of that, and then we did the B-side, which was this track called "Doublicious Groove," which was a down tempo, real groovy, kind of bubbly, kind of vibey, synthy track that came out in 1994 on City of Angels, but before that, we moved back up from Orange County into a little studio, a little house, the little 2-bedroom house. Like, it was probably 1,200 square feet, if it was that. And it had a 2-car garage in it, and it had a bomb shelter in the front yard. It was buried in the front yard. And so when we first rented, it was like a little sphere that was dropped into the ground, 40 years prior. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they were selling these bomb shelters in a day. And so, so we thought, wow, cool. We would go down there and maybe we could put an amp down there, or, we'd think about what a bomb shelter could be, but it was completely dilapidated and broken down from years of small tremors and water damage. And, but we named our studio that we built. We basically got drywall, built this little enclosure inside this garage, did the whole wall in front, put all our shit in front of it. So anytime we opened the garage door, it just looked like, oh my God, these guys, look, in this entire garage is full of shit. But lo and behold, behind that wall was a little, small little studio that,
that's genius.
Yeah. And because it was in La Crescenta, right, basically the 210 freeway was basically in our backyard. So we were never as loud as that semi truck coming by in the middle of the night. So we were able to, make all the noise that we needed to make, and it was in a safe place because we'd go out in the morning and go to breakfast after working all night, because we didn't have an air conditioner in there either, especially during the summertime. Only time you can work in this 2-car garage was like during the night. And we'd go out there and we'd be people walking their dogs and, watering their yards, and be like, hey, how's it going? We're just 2 guys just living in this little spot here, going to work. And then we just go out and get some breakfast, come back and sleep, and then, work throughout the night the next night. And so that first single, Now's the Time, sold the 3,000 copies, and then they were like, you got to do another one. So we had the sample from 1992 Democratic National Convention, where Jesse Jackson gets up there and is like, this big inspiring speech about, keep hope alive, there's hope, there's all this stuff. And we had recorded it, VHS that, and we were like, yeah, what if we use that? So we, pulled that out of the archives and then sampled that, and that came out with another B-side that was more down tempo, and then we just, that turned into the third single. And then in 1996 we local radio station in Los Angeles, the world famous K-Rock, had a DJ on during the drive time, his name is Jed the Fish, and a mutual friend of ours connected us to him, and he was wanting to build a studio, so he wanted to come by and check out our studio. And so it was like 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. He was on from like 2 to 6, and so checked out the studio. We gave him our track, the Keep Hope Alive, on vinyl. And he called us up a few hours later. He says, you want to hear what your song sounds like on the radio?
Oh man.
And we were like, are you kidding us? And we were like, absolutely, yeah. And so he had to, he said it later, he told us that he sweated because he had to pull out the record player and get it all set up, and actually drop the needle for this primetime spot, Jed the Fish's Catch of the Day. And I remember, we'll never forget, we listened to it on a little clock radio in our studio, and it just sounded massive because of the compressors they use on those those radio stations. Just everything sounds great, and so it just sounded freaking awesome. And from that playing, multiple people, including a really amazing individual by the name of John Seidel, who was starting he was the first A&R guy for this new record label that was being put together by 3 really, really amazing people. Andy Gershon, who was Smashing Pumpkins manager, Mark Williams, who was Smashing Pumpkins A&R guy, and a bunch of other A&R. He A&R'd a bunch of other big acts, and then Scott Litt, who was a producer for like all the big REM records and the Unplugged Nirvana album, and he's mixed a bunch of things, and they were starting a record label called Outpost, and John Seidel heard Keep Hope Alive on the radio that day and was like, we need to sign these guys.
Holy crap. Wait, I want to highlight some stuff real quick. That is just wild, because I'm pretty sure you guys started in 93.
Well, we started, the first thing that ever came out was 94. 2 things happened that year. That little publishing deal that we signed was that helped get a sync. And there was a movie called Species that was this sci-fi movie with a really pretty girl who's basically an alien who's going around killing a bunch of guys, having sex with them and killing them. And it was a big production at the time. It had Ben Kingsley and a bunch of other people in it, and through that connection, through an early version of Keep Hope Alive was synced into that movie. So that was like a good. I think that bought like a bunch of our gear.
But you guys didn't come up with the name until like 93. Right.
Well, actually, the name was sitting on a chalkboard for back in probably 92, because when we were thinking about at that time, like we were still working as producers, but we were thinking about like working on our own stuff, and so there was a rapper that we were working with that said the name in passing, said, "Oh, the Crystal Method," referring to this, mode of transportation that we were going to, there's a girl Crystal that's going to give us a ride to this club. Oh, the Crystal Method. Oh, we were like, oh, fuck, that sounds cool. Like write that up on the board. And so so that sat there on the board. And then when we started to make our own music and we started to we had this small publishing deal, and we had a sync in this. We met with one manager, and the first thing I remember we went to a nice restaurant, and we sat down, and he's like, "Yeah, your demo tape's awesome. You guys are, really think there's something going on, but you got to change your name, man. There's not going to be a radio station that's going to play your music because your name is too, controversial." And we're like, "Really? That's your first thing you're gonna, tell us?" And we were like, "You're wrong. Our name is freaking killer. Like at the time, our big market we thought was the UK, and they didn't know what the drug was, and even at the time the drug was a big deal. But we just, we were always it's all like crystal healing, and we had all these different meanings for the name, and yes, there was a drug connotation. Yeah, there was a drug connotation there, but it's really about the three words. They just sounded, they flowed, and at the time, like a lot of bands were naming themselves after pieces of gear. The Prodigy was named after a Moog synth, and the Juno Reactor, and 808 State, and there was all this, but we just thought it was different, and so we stuck with it. I don't know if we could, I don't think we can get away with it now. I don't know if I don't know if we were, nobody's going to be called the fentanyl method. It doesn't really flow off the tongue, but
I think that's why.
Yeah, but at the time it was in, and we were coming from the rave scene, and it sort of it stuck, and so yeah, that this thing just started to, snowball. And
yeah, I want to highlight something for everybody that I noticed early on in your story, and you also actually hinted at, is that I think one of your superpowers is that whenever an opportunity or something presented itself, you always leaned into it.
Absolutely.
Whenever you heard the Crystal Method, I mean, it just resonated. You wrote it down. Whenever you were at that live show in that warehouse, you felt that this was something and you leaned into it. Whenever you got that first pub deal, you were like, this is a great opportunity. You leaned into it. It sounds like your North Star has always guided you in a direction that took you to where you are.
Yeah. And it wasn't always, it wasn't always easy, and there wasn't always, a reward at the end of it that we, again, like when we first released our track Now Is the Time, we were never going to see any of that. I mean, maybe we got a $1,500 signing bonus or something like that, but these are albums, 12-inch vinyl that were limited to 3,000, that were going out to DJs around the country, and you just keep moving forward. You keep moving, and it's not about the numbers. It wasn't about the likes or anything of that nature for us at the time. I mean, and it was about just doing the work, keeping a positive outlook on things, and pushing forward, taking every opportunity. And again, that continued. The reason why I'm still sitting here in front of you 25 years later is that after Vegas came out and was successful and went on to sell 1 million albums, things that our manager always pushed us to do, things that weren't in our comfort zone. So at the end of that tour, we were on Family Values tour with like Korn and Filter and Limp Bizkit, playing in front of real heavy rock kids that were like initially sitting there with their middle finger up in the air, and by the end we were like, they would come up to us, and you'd get a kid with a Limp Bizkit shirt come up to us and goes, "Oh my God, that was fucking pretty good, dude. I haven't heard you guys before, but that was fucking rad. Well done. Like
Yeah, you guys brought the fucking energy.
Yeah, we brought the we wanted to we did nothing but live shows, so we'd spent the money on like bringing out all the the lights. We had a really amazing lighting director named Lawrence Upton who worked with bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Beastie Boys and Marilyn Manson, who understood how to do a rock show, and so he backlit us, and we started out with 8 strobes, and we went to 16 strobes, and then we had a show with 128 strobes. And,
oh my god!
Where it was like we'd have to start posting things in the lobby that if you're sensitive to light, you be careful, because we were. At some point we were losing people during this track called Vapor Trail. Like right when we revealed these strobes, it was like, I think somebody just passed out over there.
Shit.
So we were able to really, cultivate this vibe that we were the people's band, if you will. And again, and they're one of the greatest joys I get from meeting those people that supported us through those years is just like that kid that came up to us at the show the Family Value show in Pittsburgh or Columbus or wherever we were playing. Like we were the bridge. I was only in hip hop, or I was only into rock, but I heard your band, and it was like, oh, I like this electronic music. I like the vibe of this. And then you were the first electronic band we ever listened to, and we discovered this whole other world because of your music. There's 2.5 years, 3 years later, we were like, we got to get back in the studio. We were in the studio, we would do things, but we were kind of exhausted from being out on the road a lot. And so we'd come back and work for a little bit. And then it was like, okay, what do we do? How do we, we couldn't just go back and make Vegas 2.0. It would have been disingenuous, and we couldn't capture the magic of that. And so we started thinking of it as like, what do filmmakers do? How do we just find something else that we really like? And so we leaned into the rock stuff that we really enjoyed, and Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, we had heard through a friend that he really liked our stuff. So we reached out to him. We took a chance, and we were like, hey, is that true? You dig us? And he's like, who knows? He might've been thinking about the Chemical Brothers at the time, but he was like, yeah. Where are you guys at? He's like, oh yeah, we got a little studio in like La Crescenta. It's like, it's not he's used to going into real studios. He slipped his way out to the La Crescenta and brought his amp in, and wasn't like, what a dump. This is what it didn't have any of that rock star bullshit. And like, he was like, let's make some music. So
I love that, because that's Rage's brand.
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck about that.
Yeah. He set up his amp in the kitchen, and like, we were, by that time we did have a air conditioning. We had a window air conditioner that and it was so ghetto. We had our friend put together like a little tube venting system to where we'd be able to take the window air conditioner, the cooling that came out of that, and we had this thing all taped up, and it was just super, super ghetto. And but
the trick.
It did the trick. And we did we did Vegas there, we did Tweekend there, we did Legion of Boom there, and we made the most of it and then move forward.
I want to ask some questions though about some of these syncs, because I'm thinking about, like, of course you guys have made great music, but like, what actually made you guys iconic and really cut through? And I was thinking about it. Whenever you said like, we don't have a BBC One radio that can just make a whole nation listen to a song, we don't. But you guys had syncs, and I mean, you had the Matrix trailer, right? Like the first trailer that came out?
No, we weren't in the Matrix trailer. A lot of our music, we were up for Matrix stuff, but we didn't get it. But we were in the, we were some of the Bourne trailers. We were Blade was a big one. There was some other things, and we also. But the biggest sync that we ever got was well, first there was I can't remember which one came first, but there was a Mazda Miata ad that had High Roller in it, and it was this Mazda Miata going across the flat desert with the heat plumes coming off of it, and this really cool aggro arpeggiated part, and then the other one was there was a Gap ad that had Busy Child in it, and it was like summer of winter of '97. Here you have this ad that's on during Seinfeld and during Friends, this big Gap ad that is being played. So then that started to really take hold. The song was really recognizable, and then radio stations like K-Rock and The End and HFS and DC and FNX in Boston started to added the song into rotation. I mean, here a track with just a vocal sample and no singer was being played in the middle of Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots. So, and then we started to do radio festivals. I still remember that moment. We were like, let's go kick ass. Let's get out there and let's not be apologetic that we're different or we're not the same. We're gonna go out there and we're gonna fucking do our thing. And we maybe again you just you win people over. You win people over with an attitude that is like we belong here, and take that opportunity and make the most of it. And so we did a lot of those. Our manager, Richard, was really, he came from a rock background and he understood that world. And I remember, I remember being I remember being in his office when we were about to release Vegas. And he goes, "This is going to sell 1 million albums." And we're like, "What are you talking about?
Wow.
We've only sold 5,000 vinyl, before this." And he goes, this album is amazing, and I believe if you guys work hard enough and you take every opportunity that's in front of you, this is eventually going to sell 1 million albums. And we were like, okay, let's do it.
That's incredible.
And so, it's again, it's like doing the things that that maybe I mean, we had we were doing like tampon commercials, or we weren't playing, events where we felt that it didn't fit our brand. I mean, our brand was, two guys from the same world you're from. And we just, we found our way. And we always, like, when we performed, we always pushed our gear right to the front of the stage. We weren't hiding anything, like there's pedals on the ground, and got my Nord over here, and we had all these DX72s that were all, MIDI, they MIDI'd up, and I was super aggressive moving around, and Ken was like, kind of initially like fine tuning the sounds, like, oh, here's, you're going to hit the delay here, and, carving out some of the EQs for some of the things that we were playing. But for the most part, we were just like, two normal guys that that appreciate rock and electronic music, and this is our fusion of it, and hope you like it. We know you're gonna like it. We know you're gonna like it because we like it and we love it. So we're confident that you're gonna love it as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. I think that I hope for people listening, if they're an artist or a producer or whatever, lean into that collaboration, or take this as a sign. Like, if they've been thinking about, I should just let these things come to me and say yes whenever it makes sense, obviously. But like, don't be so precious of your sound that you remove this cool collaboration that could happen. Yeah. And I think that from the syncs that you've mentioned, plus we haven't talked about, I mean, you guys have been in so many different video games.
True.
I think that, to my point that I was making before of maybe we didn't have a DJ that could really televise a track everywhere, I think that you guys found your fan base. Like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like y'all's fan base is very much like the nerddom world. Like people who love video games, dark video games, people who love darker movies, people who are like diehard fans because they associate you guys with great times in their life that maybe have come through some kind of video format.
Well, to your point, one of the biggest moments when we, back in 98, when we did a sync for the biggest global video game at the time was FIFA. And so, you know, you had Busy Child, Keep Hope Alive, and I think now's the time synced into this video game that, you know, you couldn't help but hear the music. It was like, I think there might have been a thing you can turn it off, but also in that same game was song number 2 from Blur, which is the biggest, you know, one of the biggest sync songs on the planet. And there was a couple other ones that were really globally big tunes, and, you know, here 3 of our songs. And so, you know, we also did a video game called N2O, which where we
I used to play the shit out of that game.
Yeah, where we did all of our music is only us. So we used remixes and different things, and it was an epic game. And we did a tour, the N2O tour, which I didn't know that you were a fan of that game. I came across a very limited supply of the original stickers from that from that era.
Yeah, dude, my friend growing up, I didn't have a PlayStation. He did. I had the N64, or I had an older Nintendo at that time. So I'd go over to his place to play. Pitch black in the room and loud as fuck speakers just so we could jam out.
And I see where you like the pitch black. That's
Yeah. And his TV was backlit. It was quite a big screen, but it was backlit, which, I mean, that's just not a thing anymore, obviously. It was like a projector projecting into it. And so if you had a pitch black room, you could see much better.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Just the experience.
Oh, yeah. I imagine so, yeah. So, yeah, without a doubt, the video game world was huge, especially in those early years. They're not going there for the music, but the music's in there. And that's something that, without a doubt, propelled us even farther because, you know, again, you just got to find a way to get people to hear you, and then that's where they can make the choice for themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want people to understand that there are just so many different ways to make it as an artist, or to like get to your fans. Just don't cut yourself off to really cool opportunities that may come. And that leads me to how did you get into like film scoring? Because I think that came along, or at least like you guys making soundtracks to full films, right?
We did a couple of things, and where we were just doing syncs, and maybe we'd do change of maybe an edit or something that was different for a sync. And then we just started, people asked us to do, you know, certain things, and we just said yes a lot. And I think it would have continued on if oh, sorry. Hey, honey.
Hi, can you get me?
I can't get you right this minute, but I will be able to get you soon.
Okay.
Where are you at?
I'm at Nicole's.
Can you hold there for 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye. My daughter. Dad calling in her dad Uber service. But yeah, so we did that Almost Human show. It would have gone on farther, but it was a big, you know, it was a Warner Brothers produced show that was on, that was a J.J. Abrams Bad Robot production that was on Fox. And I think there was just it cost a lot to make. And so, but it was very cool, especially because we were just kind of on our own. You know, we didn't have those notes, you know, like where you okay, on this scene, I want tension. I don't want it to ramp up too much until it gets to this spot right here, you know, and then I want the relief with some chords and something, you know, where you're really getting serious, you know, notes. It was just like, you know, we like what you do. Just do more of that. You know, it's something that it's not my comfort zone, but it's one of those things that I did like because, again, when I like reflect back on like staring at an empty canvas, here was something to follow. Here, there's a ship that's coming across here, and there's a fight that breaks out here, and then there's tension here, and then there's a relief, and then and then so you're like, okay, I've got a blueprint to work with, something that to follow.
Yeah.
And I did like that aspect of it. Go with the flow, follow the directions, follow the scene, do what you can to help the scene along, and to be a servant to the picture, rather than like in the past just doing something for yourself or doing something in the name of the Crystal Method.
Yeah.
This was like, you got to serve the scene.
Yeah, scratching a different itch,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and it was fun. I did like it, and I do appreciate it. And I will. There are some other things that hopefully and they come up in the near future that will allow me to scratch that itch, as you said.
That's awesome. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Throw a little bit of chaos in there, and I'm sure that you learn some really cool things and you bring it over to the Crystal Method.
Yeah.
And also, there's this beautiful full circle moment that you're giving to your child self whenever you're listening to John Williams or whoever, and you're listening to a score that made up a world. You're fulfilling that little prophecy for yourself. I think that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's still every bit of this journey has been something that I reflect back on. I remember, moments being on stage and thinking, like, having flashbacks of, like, the kid that was, playing guitar in front of the mirror, like, trying to, imagine, what it'd be like to create something that had that moment it's so far out of reach. You don't even, can't even, it's all fantasy. But then have the fantasy fulfilled through, not a, hit the lotto moment. It's more of a grinding it out, and putting in the effort and belief in oneself, and focused on, moving forward one moment at a time, doing the best you can, and not taking anything for granted.
That's beautiful. Well, so I want to fast forward until now, or roughly now. What does it feel like creating just on your own? It's just you now. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to know the differences other than just you noodling around and then now you have to change the hat. But, like, is it more fulfilling in certain ways and less fulfilling in others? I just want to know the differences.
Well, when Ken retired and said, I want you to continue on and do your thing, and I'll be your biggest supporter, and I took that as being an opportunity for me to understand the legacy of the band, but also take it in my own direction. There was some moments of, like, yes, there's not going to be that tension that sometimes happens when you're working with another person, like, where you're, sometimes you get carried away in the moment and you're like, no, I like this for, well, fuck you then. Like, because we were both of us very opinionated, very strong-willed. So there was yes, there wasn't going to be that. But out of that comes, something I think better than I wouldn't have been, my ideas wouldn't have been anything without Ken. And Ken's ideas would have been, yes, we could have individually done great things, but collectively we did something even better. So I do miss that part of it, and I do collaborate with people. I do send things to people, like, what do you think of this? Because I really relied on, like, is Ken gonna like this? Is he gonna, because then he comes in and goes, that's awesome. And then he gets and starts to take over and like works off of that, like a baton, not that, he's going to loop this lap and come back around. I'm going to grab it in a minute, but wow, it's nice to like have somebody else like, take this idea further.
Yeah.
And
you're a collaborative spirit.
Yeah. I think that, I need that the collaborative spirit that working with someone that can give you notes and can tell you, yeah, let's lose that section. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Well, I just spent like, 3 days on that section, but you know what? You're right. Let's do something better. Or, just somebody giving a different perspective. Initially I took the challenge, and I ran with it and I enjoyed sort of being a solo artist, if you will. But it, at times it became, a little daunting, and it became, like I just need to hear some feedback from somebody else. And so I do have a group of, friends that I collaborate with and other people that I'm meeting. This last album I worked with David Martinson, who goes by the name of Val, Vaal, who was just, I was like, wow, you're just like so creative, and you think outside the box. IG or YouTube. I mean, we would have been like filming, all those little moments that happened. Although that might have been distracting. So anybody who can post and still be productive without overthinking the posts, that's a world that is a challenge for me. Those people that can think in that way or have a setup that allows them to live in those that multiverse, if you will, of social media and the creative space, I find fascinating. But I'm happy to be able to lean on the things that Ken and I did together. I do still hear him, his voice, in good and bad in my brain sometimes when I'm doing in there by myself. But I chose to embrace the opportunity, and then reach out to kind, like-minded individuals who like to create music or create something without drama. And like Ken and I did some fucking amazing things, and it's given me this platform to continue on as the band. And although, I do miss him greatly at different times, I've come to the point now, it's been 6 years since he retired, 7 years since he retired. So, I'm happy with the opportunity that I have, and make the most of it is my goal on a daily basis.
That's beautiful.
But actually,
thank you.
some days I get distracted, by life, family, and my daughter doesn't give a crap about dad being productive in the studio. She's like, I need a ride, come pick me up. I'm like, okay honey, I'll see you soon. So although I did plan on going back to the studio today, I did I could still do that later, but it's nice having this other life that takes me away from the studio every once in a while and gives me a distraction, so I'll be back in the studio tomorrow, then going out this weekend to do a show in Asheville, North Carolina. So
hell yeah, I'm gonna ask some questions about, or like a question about continuing forward, but I want to ask you this big question of like, what does success mean to you? I'm really curious.
Success. Success is meant to me. I'm grateful for the life it's given me. I've been able to wake up every day make music for a living, and although at times, you get frustrated with that, what that means. Success means that you got to somehow, it's like it's a balloon that needs to be, blown up a little bit every once in a while. It can float around the room for a while, but you're eventually going to have to, give it a little bit of life, or give it a push. And so it's been a blessing to be able to have this life, and to have created something that has somehow, found its way into another person's life. But I mean, success is something that you can't take for granted. So it will give you lots of highs, but it will also put you in a situation where you feel like you got to continue to work, because there's 1,000 artists every day discovering themselves in their bedrooms, in their basements, noodling on a computer, or playing on a piano, or opening up a DAW there with the thought process of like, I want to create. And so every day there's thousands of kids that discover that this is what they want to do. And I'm in a situation where I get to do that. So don't forget that. Continue to grow, and don't take anything for granted.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I think I want to end off on something that I think the listeners and viewers could really learn from, especially, if they're artists, but I really just think like any creative field whatsoever. And you're in a unique position where I think this is the 30th year that you guys are creating music together. Or
I always thought that the movie Species came out in '93, but I think that the track that was in the movie came out in actually '95, so or '94. So official release, the first one ever being Now's the Time, which came out in '94. So next year will be the 30th anniversary. Yes, next year will be the 30th anniversary.
Okay, so but at that, I want people to know, and I'm really curious, how can we all stay in whatever industry or creative field we are for that long and continue going? Because you're playing shows this weekend and you're doing festivals this year. How can people have the longevity in art like you have?
It takes, just like if you've ever watched a construction site, you just, one day at a time, one day you got to put the pavement down, and it just doesn't happen overnight. You have to work, hopefully have a group of people like I've had surrounding me for the last 25 years, plus 30 years almost, where they have your interests in mind, and give you great advice, and help nurture and protect and steward your ideas and your creativity. And if you don't have those people, then jettison them and find people that do have your best interests in mind. And then, you got to continue to evolve. You got to continue to move forward. It's for the good and the bad. And so, and then, don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to fall on your face. Don't be afraid to disappoint, because you got to turn the page and move forward. And what really, I think, it allows me to continue to do these shows and festivals and tour and still make music is that you have to make a connection. There's no one more excited to be there than I am. I go up on stage and then I'm like, I become awesome. A completely different thing. And I'm combustible, and I know what it feels like to go to a show and watch somebody that doesn't feel like, does that person really want to be here? Yeah. Like, are they having any fun doing this? Like, yeah, I mean, I'm intense and I'm like really like in the moment, and and then as soon as the show's over, I'm back, it's like then, but I go, and I, instead of going back in the dressing room and like going, yeah, fuck, that was an awesome show. I go into the crowd and I talk to people and I get these stories and I take pictures with people. And yes, it's very, it's kind of like, oh, you're just living in that moment. I'm like, yeah, because our music has lived in their moments and they get to share these moments with me. Think about the future, but be accountable for your energy and the opportunity you get in that moment when you're on stage or when you're meeting someone. Or how do I think like that 20-year-old kid that was really hungry and it's something that I work on and how to reconnect. But be grateful. I'm really grateful for everything, and I'm excited to get into the studio tomorrow. And if I do, and when I do, make the most of it. And if at the end of the day I don't accomplish my goals, well then lick your wounds and come back the next day and keep trying, keep punching.
Yes, I'm grateful for you saying that and for you being here. And if you want to give us some final words and explain your quote over there that you chose.
Yeah, well,
For those like listening, I guess this is going to be the second episode out. I have a chalkboard here that I have people write on if they're not visually watching. But so we have a chalkboard and there's a quote and.
Well, I can't remember where the quote. It might have come from a movie or a TV show. It's 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 3 lefts do. And I just found it to be like, taking that saying 2 wrongs don't make a right, and just flipping it around a bit, or, if you think of it in a different way, yeah, you may be making wrong turns or making wrong decisions, but eventually, enough of those will get you going in the right way. So, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 3 lefts do visually get you going right, is one of those things that I thought it was a fun play on words and something that I when you asked me to put something up there, that's what I came up with.
I mean, that is perfect for this podcast.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Fail forward.
Yeah.
Keep on just trying, moving forward and fail.
And then when the floor does fall from beneath you, you not wallow in that pit. You got to find your way out of it, and then that gives you the confidence to avoid falling in that hole again, or at least when you go down, you can get out of it quicker.
Yeah, thank you. That's a perfect way to end this.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
All right. So now that you've listened to this episode, I am certain that you've taken away so many different key points from what Scott had to say about his career, the Crystal Methods, career in video games and film and touring and almost 30 years of experience. From this episode, I took away several key points that I'd like to highlight here. So one of them is to create, you have to start. And that seems so common sense, but if you don't just noodle around and play and, kind of be in the sandbox with a synth, a guitar, your voice, whatever, you never get to just be in the mode of creation. If you sit down with an end goal in mind, chances are that you're going to get lost trying to get there. But if you just have fun, like he said, plug a synth into guitar pedals and distort it and just like play and noodle around, eventually something is going to happen that's really cool. And it's your job to just be able to know, okay, this is a thing. This sounds cool. Let's run with this. I can't help you with that part, but getting started is the key. Secondly, his parents always having played music in the house is just a recurring theme that I'm hearing with my guests. That at an early age, we're just so impressionable on whatever is played around us, and the ability to just absorb whatever your parents are playing and have it channel through what you later create just seems to be a thread that goes through most of these guests. Number 3, I'd love to highlight this. And whenever he said it, it made so much sense to me. But finding your niche is so important. But even more than that, where is there a hole in the market? And what I mean by this is whenever Scott talked about the Crystal Method, whenever they went to a rave at a warehouse downtown LA, they heard DJs playing out music in a room that was black, dark, and everybody was just happy and excited to be there. No bad feelings at all. It was just moving to the music. But then they went home and they tried to get those same records and play them at home and just hear them over their sound system. They couldn't find these club mixes. So instead of just going to the raves to hear this music, they decided, why don't we make that music, but then add their touch, which is aggression and this like antagonizing force in their music. I just thought that was huge. And I think that a lot of people could implement that. Brings up a point in my mind, actually, that I heard Rick Rubin say that, he would used to go to places and listen to people rap and spin vinyl, but rap. And the aggression and the feeling that he felt in the club could not be heard on records. And that's why he sought out to make that kind of music with artists. So great parallel there. Find your true fans. Again, maybe an obvious thing, but what the Crystal Method did so well is early on they started to get syncs in these what would become cult classic type movies or nerd kingdom, nerddom fandom world where we're talking about video games and sci-fis and thrillers and just, he said FIFA and Spawn and all these movies that just have like this cult following. They never didn't service these fans. Continuously on their mind, they were like, how do we service those fans more? How do we keep on giving them what they want? And a lot of people think that that's not the way to go about making music, but I never understood why it was wrong to give fans what they want. Keep giving the fans what they want. They love you for that. And I think the Crystal Method did that incredibly well. Another huge point. Whenever signs in life show you that, here's an opportunity, and it may seem difficult to make that choice because you're giving up on something else, or it's just a tough choice in general, or an opportunity presents itself, but you're not looking for it, so you don't see it. What Scott did so incredibly well, and you can hear it in this podcast, is that whenever an opportunity showed itself, he realized it and he leaned in. And of course, I'm sure there were times that he didn't, but you can hear all the times he did and how it took him to where he is. Lastly, I think this is such a great point, but to have a 30-year career, or almost a 30-year career, surrounding yourself with people who continuously push you to be better at what you are day after day seems to be the answer. Whenever somebody is holding you down, is not helping you move towards your goals, you have to get rid of them. You have to remove them from your team. We have to be as lean and mean as possible to reach our goals. If we want to reach the top at any craft, you have to surround yourself with great people, and you yourself have to be great. And so them being great and you being great is kind of the cyclical thing that you all help each other. And maybe the people around you aren't supposed to be around you forever, but realize when they are not supposed to be around you and cut them out. You're doing them a service as well, because maybe they need to move on to something as well, or something else rather. So hopefully that really helps you hone in on what the key takeaways from this podcast are. This one was incredible. Thanks for listening to the Grounds for Success podcast. I want to thank all of the people who work on this podcast and help me out. My team is everything to me, and without them, I couldn't bring these to you every single week. I want to also thank all of my clients on the mixing and mastering side, because without you, I could not have Grounds for Success. So thank you so much. If you're enjoying the Grounds for Success podcast, please follow, like, and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. It helps us out a ton, and I want to keep getting this content to you in whichever way you listen or watch.